Notion offline mode is here. Yep, I can't quite believe that I'm actually saying this. When I got into Notion like 6 or 7 years ago, when offline mode was probably the most requested feature at that point. And since then, it actually turned into a bit of a meme. No matter what feature Notion would release, a lot of people would always ask, but when offline mode? And now, Notion actually did it. But is offline mode actually good? What does it mean for your workflows? And what are the things that you should keep in mind? In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through these questions and everything else that you need to know about offline mode for Notion. The most important thing first, Notion offline mode will be free for all users with unlimited pages. So no matter what plan you're on, you will be able to use Notion offline wherever you're going. To make any page available offline, you can just go to the 3 dots in the top right corner of that page, and then you see that we have this new toggle available offline, right? I'm going to zoom in here a little bit so it's a bit clearer to see. Now, if I click this, make available offline, right, we see this little pop-up here in the bottom that I'm covering currently, which tells me all my pages have been downloaded. I can also click on view all downloads, and that brings me to a list of all my offline available pages. Now, you can also get to that section by just going to your account settings and then looking under your account, right, you see offline. And there you see, right, the pages that are currently available offline for me. On the top of the page, you see in my case, I have automatic downloads and it's currently enabled. If you are on a paid plan, then Notion will automatically start downloading your most recent favorites, your most recent visited pages and your favorites. And in both cases, it will download the top 20 entries. So for recent pages, right, that's always what you also see if you pull up search, either by pressing Command P or going to the sidebar, right, and pulling that up. But if you press Command P, you see the most recent pages that you open. So the last 20 of those will be always made available offline. And then of course, in your favorite section, right, so whatever you have here at the top favorited, if you have more than 20, then the order will matter. In my case, it's only 3, so they all will be downloaded. That is the only difference between paid plans and free plans here with Notion. All plans have unlimited offline pages, and all plans allow you to mark certain pages as available offline. And then if you are on a paid plan, Notion will automatically start downloading your most recent and favorites. Now, figuring out exactly what will be available offline can be a bit tricky. So I put together this hopefully helpful flowchart. You can also find this afterwards in the blog post linked in the description. On there, we will also keep this up to date, right? Notion, of course, will further develop this feature. So we assume that a lot of the things that are currently still red will be available later down the line. All right, but let's zoom in a little bit and tackle this from the beginning. If you mark a page offline, what will happen is that first it will download all the page content. So if you have a typical text-heavy page, right, like the one that I just showed, then you will see pretty much exactly the same offline as online. What won't be downloaded are sub-pages. So if you are using a system, right, where you are nesting a lot of pages within pages, which is something I would be careful with, then you will have to mark them available for offline individually. So one thing that won't work is to have sort of like 1 mega page in your workspace, right? Move everything into this one page and then mark that as offline. In this way, Notion offline differs from share settings, right? Sharing and permissions on a page waterfalls down. So if you share a top level page, right? Publish it to the web, for example, all these sub pages are available as well. But if you mark it as offline, only that specific page is there. Second, when it comes to databases, Notion is going to load content from databases on your page, but only the first 50 entries on the first view. So that means if you have a database with several views set up there, right? So for example, my tasks on the first view, and then my tasks today, and then overdue tasks, and the first view filters out all the tasks that are overdue, then Notion will download only the up to the first 50 tasks, right, in this bed that qualify for this first view and will ignore the other views. Now, this happens regardless of whether the database that you have on a page is an actual inline database, right? So a database that lives in that page as a child, or whether you have a linked view, which is generally the way, right, that we recommend you build all your systems. You have your main databases out of the way somewhere in the backend, and then the main linked view on a page. If you're curious why, well, I have a few tutorials for you linked down below in the description. Now, additional entries and entries on the secondary view, they won't be loaded. But you can kind of work around this if you need to optimize a page for offline by just having several instances of the database, right, through linked views. Let me show you what I mean. On this page here, I have now a linked database view of all the tasks that I am responsible for. And that is the first view. There's also another view that has all the tasks, right, which are also assigned to some of my team members. Now, if I mark this page as offline, currently it will download these pages. And the ones in all tasks will not be available because it's not the first view. But what I can do is I can copy the link, right, to this view, and I can just paste this below, or I can build it from scratch and basically create a second view, right, of the same database down below. So these separate instances, right, of a database, they will be respected for the system. So in this case, if we have sort of like all tasks, and then we have above here my tasks. In this case, Notion offline will first download these, the first 50 in my tasks, and then it will again download the first 50 in this. And if it's of course the same ones, then we have sort of an overlap, but through that way you can get information from different views of the same database available offline. So I just turned off the Wi-Fi and you can see I am now offline. This also, by the way, tells me whether there are any edits that will be synced the next time I go online. And currently we see that I have my tasks here available and I have all the tasks available here. Now, of course, you will still see the other views here, right? So the views don't disappear. It's just that if I click now into a different view and all tasks would not have been downloaded separately, I would not see any of the tasks for Jill, right? So it would show me just the subset of the information that I have downloaded. That's also one thing, right, to keep in mind. When you are working then offline, since Notion will not download all the pages of a database, when you look at one, you need to keep in mind that this might not be all the entries. So for example, if you, for whatever reason, have some views and only some of them are, your tasks assigned to you, and if you then offline check, okay, what is everything on my plate? Depending on how you have set up your offline pages, you cannot be 100% sure that all of your tasks are downloaded if you have the wrong view first, right? So for example, let's say I would have all tasks first and they're just a bunch of tasks, by far more than 50. Well, it would download both mine and the ones from other people without making a difference. And then you might be missing some of yours, right? So for offline mode, best practice to put the one view, right, that matters most to you, that contains all the information that you want to see, as the very first one. And of course, keep in mind that Notion already told us that they're working on extending this limit. So the 50 pages are a limit for now, but I'm sure in the future we will be able to download a lot more information from our databases. While we're offline, let's just look at a little bit of the experience here so that we can then understand how this works on the other end. So I can simply go now in, right, and pretty much all my standard blocks are available. So I can start writing some text. I can also create some columns, right? And in these columns, I can create callouts. So like, left side, left side, and another callout for the right side. And all of these changes will be synced back once I'm online. What is not available, however, are some of the more advanced and special blocks. So for example, I won't be able to upload files, images, or any of the like. And I also will not be able to add a button, right? So buttons are another thing that is disabled. What will also not work in offline are any kind of embeds, right? So if we, for example, want to embed our flowchart, that also needs to happen offline. So basically anything that would require you uploading data to Notion, first case. Second, anything that would require Notion to fetch information from another place, right? What happens with an embed? Or third, anything that is computational heavy, like adding a button that then can run an automation. These things currently don't work in offline. And this last thing, things that are computational heavy, that's a general aspect. So it's not just buttons that don't work on a page, but also within a database automation, you won't be able to create a new automation, right? That will not work. You also see that my formula property, it does not show any information. So formulas are deactivated, and relations and rollups, right? The other more complex properties, they also don't exist. So I can go in, I can add a property, but as you can see, I cannot add files or media. I cannot add a new formula, a new button. I cannot add a new ID. Relations, it tells me here that I can add, but actually when you then do that, you will see that if I just link this to anything, right, let's make it a two-way relation, that if I click into this, depending on whether or not that is present, right, we don't see anything loading here. So same way as with formulas and the other advanced properties, relations and rollups won't show you any data while you are offline. All the other database properties work just as you're used to do. So I can reassign this task to Jill, and once I go back offline, she will be informed that this is her task now. I can move things along, right, to in progress. I can change the priority on tasks. I can change the area and the due date. All your normal information, right, that is editable both in databases and in the text part of your Notion page. Now, if I hover now over here, I see that there are 93 edits that will be synced back. So there's quite a lot of things, right, that add up with all the block style in Notion and these changes. So let's go back online and make sure that this syncs. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to enable my Wi-Fi again, and then we're going to wait for a second to see what happens once we switch from offline here. Now we're online. Now you see, okay, things are looking a bit different again, right? First, you notice that my database is colorful again. Conditional formatting is another thing that doesn't work offline, but you see as soon as I go online, it is back. My formula runs again, right? I can now click into global databases and actually select an entry from the other side and connect it here. And of course, all my text changes, right, they are simply there and present. Back at our flowchart, right, let's just revisit again what I just mentioned. On databases, we get the first 50 entries on our view, and we can work with all basic properties, but we won't be able to work with rollups, relations, formulas, and automations, and we won't be able to work with conditional formatting. In terms of the page content, right, we get all our basic editing blocks, but things like charts, buttons, forms, images or files, and embeds, right, those won't work. So let me just add embeds here to the list. And one last thing, share settings will also be disabled when you're offline, so you can't go offline and then share a page with a team member. Of course, right, they couldn't get a notification anyway, but it also won't give them the notification when you're online, so you need to wait until you're back online for this to properly work. Moving on with the important things to know about Notion offline mode. One very crucial bit here is that marking something as offline is always device specific. So first, you need to use the app. The offline toggle will not show when you are in the browser. So you need to have either the desktop app, right, or on mobile, the mobile Notion app. And then when you mark something as offline, it is marked on that device as offline. This is so that when you mark a lot of things offline on your desktop, right, and it downloads all that data, that your mobile storage doesn't fill up automatically. Because, of course, the stuff that you download need to be stored on your local device. So that means, right, there's currently no option to say, okay, set this available offline everywhere. When you do it manually through the toggle on the top, you need to do that individually for every device where you need it. However, of course, when it comes to the most recent pages, right, in your favorites that are downloaded automatically on the paid plan, that happens across all devices. So there's nothing that you have to do there. But you can deactivate it on an individual device and then it won't download it for that device. Now, that also means it's very important to understand how devices learn whether something has been updated or not, right? Let's say I have this landing page, right, where we inform our clients of how they can work together with us, right? And I want to make some changes to our long-term strategic partnership offer. I have it downloaded both on my laptop, right, and my phone, because I know when I'm on the go, I might have some cool ideas for it. If I make any changes to it now, then my phone will get that update automatically as long as it's connected to the Wi-Fi, right? So if both of them are currently on network and online, if I make a change here, then after roughly 10 minutes, Notion will notify all the other devices that have this page downloaded and tell them that this is a new and updated version. So you don't need to specifically open a page again, right, on a different device to make sure it has the latest version. You don't even have to open Notion in that case. Of course, if my phone is offline when this change happens, right, then it won't know about this until it goes online the next time. Now, this brings us to a very important point, and that is conflicts, right? One of the hardest parts about building offline mode and why it took Notion so long to ship this is that this is not single player, right? I don't work in my Notion alone. And in particular for teams where like dozens of people might make changes to a page while you're offline, this is quite tough. So Notion is actually developing a new conflict resolution framework, and they apparently will share a bit more details about that in a blog post first, but we can sort of learn the basic rules by just testing and seeing how this works. So I have my long-term strategy paper here, right? And I have it downloaded both on my Mac and my phone. And now I'm going to go offline. I'm going to make some changes to it. On my Mac, I will go in here, right? It says 4 pillars of a really cool partnership. Let's just make sure that we highlight this right in a specific color, so we know that this change right is coming from my desktop. On my phone, however, like the other me, in the meantime, changed it to, I don't think you can see this right with the webcam, the autofocus is not that great, but 4 pillars of the perfect collaboration. So let's go back online and see what happens. Just going to make sure we are back on our Wi-Fi, and now in a second, right, our offline part should disappear and we will see the changes sync on the page. And there we see it, right? So in this case, 4 pillars of a really cool, the perfect collaboration. So since on the phone, right, I deleted a part of that word, right, that deletion was for everyone. Whereas the part of, a really cool, right, that just wasn't relevant here anymore. So in this case, since the main change from this workspace was deleted, the other part just doesn't show up anymore. Let's do another example, right? So now we're offline again. Here I'm going to, add a second sample sentence. And we're just going to highlight this in, let's make this blue. And then also maybe bold. Let's also, just bold strategic up here. And then stay ahead of the curve. I don't like ahead of the curve. Let you stay on top of your game, exclamation mark. And then on my phone, right, I will make some other edits to this. So here we will just add to the page like curve and beat the competition. All right, perfect. So again, same game, right? I'm going to go back online with both devices and we're going to see how that conflict resolution works with Notion. And there we have it. So we of course kept our additions, right, that we added in here. And we also kept the addition from the other page. But the deletion, right, from my page here was also kept right on top of your game. And this is basically, right, how this conflict resolution works. It is very additive. So basically, it stacks the changes on top of each other. Person deleted something, perfect, it's gone. Stack on top that someone added a sentence after it, let's add that sentence. Someone deleted, from the sentence something before it went offline again, well, nothing happens. And then if you make another change, right, if you were to write the word later back in, it would, well, add that word back in. So it's this stacking of additive changes, how we are resolving conflicts. And very importantly, right, in most situations, this will also be what you want, right, in the most intuitive way of working with it. But of course, it can create confusing moments. If you edit a document, right, that someone else collaborates on while they are online, and you are removing certain elements from it, right, they might be very confused and now their sentences don't make sense anymore. But this is just a general problem, right? Whenever you have this kind of multi-people editor, some people offline experience. So I think we will get used to that. And there's not really a great way, right, to resolve this otherwise. We can't assign priority currently to one editor or something like this, and building sort of a whole merging, right, the way that version control for tools like Git work, right, for engineers, we then see all the changes line by line and can say, okay, this is a conflicting change. I want to accept this version, or yeah, I don't want to accept it. That would be a bit overkill. So I think this is a simple and very effective method. Plus, remember that you can always at any time, right, go into the 3 dots and then into your updates analytics, and you see in real time, right, when things were changed and how they were changed. Of course, since all of these changes were made by me, Matthias, we don't get too many information about it. But if, user 1 makes one change and user 2 makes another, then you can easily also see, okay, this is actually, why the sentence now looks weird. Let's make sure that we update that accordingly. Last but not least, search will also work while you're offline, right? So if you have a lot of pages offline, you can still use search to jump to your most important ones. It will prioritize the pages that are offline, so you might see slightly different search results versus the ones when you're online. But Notion AI, of course, won't work either offline, so you need to actually do the classic search and can't just ask it, hey, where do I find this kind of information? Oh, and one thing I nearly forgot. You can, of course, when you're offline, create subpages, right? So their content doesn't sync when they are created before you go offline. But once you're offline, you can, of course, add subpages to this, right? Hello, world. And then the next time you go online, they will be synced back to your system. So much for offline mode. Pretty crazy. Speaking of crazy, I recently did something quite weird in Notion. I wanted to build a real game and see how far I can push Notion for that. Turns out, quite far. I even end up playing that game with someone who works at Notion. If you're curious about that story and how you can play your own games in Notion, well, then click here. I'll see you in a few seconds.